Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our deep dive into the Charter of Triunnia Genesis Codex. The previous videos we looked at, which explored sources of law, definitions, and taxonomies, can be said to be observations about our universe. From those observations, we know certain things for sure about how our universe works, and these are laws which are codified here, and which we will explore in this video. The laws are thus the law of thought, ownership of self, ownership of thought, the law of free will, the law of forgetting. These are all immutable universal laws. Any society that works in alignment with them will scale well, maintain peace, and thrive. Any society that is misaligned with them will not have a long life cycle. Let us begin. Okay, so the next section in the Genesis Codex is on universal law. The Genesis Codex is about mapping out reality so that we know where we are, so that we can have a solid foundation upon which to build a society. Where the taxonomies were actually doing those maps, this section on universal law is now recognizing the laws of the universe. And so these are the core laws that we're going to work with in this society. 141, the law of thought. That's the big one that we work with. Everything existing on the physical plane is an exteriorization of a thought, which must be balanced through the one who issued the thought and in accordance with that one's responsibility at the conjunction of time, condition, and place. And that's Percival's definition from Thinking and Destiny. And then here's a quote from Percival. The law of thought is destiny. Thinking is the basic factor in shaping human destiny. What you think informs what you do, and therefore, because every thought has a balancing factor, so you'll think about things one way and you'll act according to that one way. But as you work through nature, the balancing factor is going to rear its head at some point. And when it does, you're going to encounter the opposite of your thinking. And so then you have to balance it at some point if you're paying attention to that. And it's very easy not to. So you miss the opportunity, then you go through it again until such time as you do actually get a clue or you do actually learn from it. So this is the basic law that we follow in Triunnia, and this is a new capability of incorporating this law into the legal frameworks of a country. No other country does this or even knows that they can. And so because of this, we're going to unfold a whole new upgrade in civilization, let's say. Okay, and as a consequence of this law, so in the previous section, we showed you a map of the triune self. Now we're establishing ownership over that triune self. Triune self ownership. And I'll tell you why after we go through it. Ownership of self. Every triune self owns itself. You own yourself, right? Does anybody else own you? No, and they can't. And so if anybody claims to own you, that's a breach of this law. And that's a problem. That's illegal in Triunia. Ownership of parts. Every triune self owns each one of its parts. By virtue of 132, a triune self, every triune self owns its respective knower, thinker, and doer. These were the major parts of the triune self. It's a trinity. Every triune self owns its respective minds. I-ness, selfness, rightness, reason, feeling, desire, and the objective mind or body mind. In common language, we often refer to mind as in my mind and whatever's going on there, but technically we have 7 minds. And so that's recognized here. And each of those minds is your property. You own it. Every triune self owns its respective faculties. And the faculties are again light, I am, time, motive, image, dark, and focus. Again, you own them. They are your property. No one else owns them. Every triune self owns its respective breath form, the form soul, and the breath. Every triune self owns its respective human body and human being. So You're not your body. You're the intelligent incorporeal entity inhabiting the body, driving it, owning it. And of course, there is the body there as well. And so this establishes a property relation between you and your body. You own it. No one else owns it. This relation comes first. This is always first. Every triune self owns its respective senses: sight, hearing, taste, and smell. In thinking and destiny, there's only four senses that are recognized. Feeling and sensation that is not coming from any of these senses goes to the feeling mind instead. And those sensations, well, they don't come in through the senses, so you feel them. It's a different input into your system. And technically, the sight, hearing, taste, and smell, they also all go to the feeling mind, but they're special. And then every triune self owns its respective ayah, whatever the ayah is. So you have parts, but you also have processes. And we showed that in self-government from within. So now we recognize ownership over that process. Every triune self owns its non-physical and physical processes. By virtue of a triune self, 133, 132, a triune self, and 133, self-government from within, every triune self owns its respective thought process, and every triune self owns its respective biological processes. So the thought process is non-physical, and the biological processes are physical. And you own that process. So if somebody tries to change that process, that's a crime. That's illegal in Triunia. It's a huge problem because it's very damaging to you. That captures the situation where you get like a device implanted in your head and it gives you mind control. You no longer own your thought process as a result of cognitive warfare. Highly, highly illegal in Triunia. Huge problem. And so right here in our constitution, we're stopping it before it even happens. No other country can do this. They don't even know. They don't even know about this. So in those countries, you'll be at risk, but not here. Ownership of exteriorizations. Okay, so you think a thought, you're bound to that thought. The thought exteriorizes. You own the outcome of the exteriorization. Every triune self owns its respective exteriorizations and their particulars. By virtue of 132, a triune self, and 134, exteriorization, every triune self owns its respective objects. You own your things, right? Makes sense. Every triune self owns its respective actions. You own what you do. It's yours. You did it. You own it. Yeah, there's no abdicating from responsibility here. It's a society about maximum freedom, but that requires also maximum responsibility. So you have to own it. Every triune self owns its respective events, and then we further clarify that every triune self owns the events that happen to it. Events are things in nature that happen to you, or they happen in nature and maybe you witness it and it doesn't actually affect you. The thing is, the event comes from a thought, and if you own the thought, you own the event. For example, if you set up a transaction somewhere and it's a recurring transaction, you own the thought of that transaction, and every single instance of that transaction that recurs, that's an event that stems from the thought of the original transaction. And so you own all of those events because they're all part of the same transaction. Every triune self owns its respective time of exteriorization. So exteriorizations require a time, condition, and place, and a body, and so you own the time when that occurs for you. And you also own your condition, or whatever the condition is, of the situation of the exteriorization. So you own it. You own the situation. Something to think about there. That's actually really good because that means if you own it, you can take care of it, be a guardian for whatever is going on there. That can tie into that protector mindset that some people have. Every triune self owns its respective place of exteriorization, and that's just location. So it's similar to above. And then ownership of other property. Every triune self owns its respective time. So we had time of exteriorization, then this is time in general. You own your time, right? And you own your labor, you own your conditions. Whether you are healthy or you are diseased, it's all you, you own it. Next section, ownership of thought. Okay, so now we start getting a bit more complicated. We're going to actually start applying the law of thought in ways that recognize thoughts as beings, but there's also ownership there. 1431A, ownership of a thought in itself. Every thought is a being with ownership over itself. Yeah, thoughts are beings. They're not very conscious beings, but they're out there in nature doing whatever according to their aim. And then eventually they too will grow up, evolve, become an animal or something, an insect, a plant, an animal, and then eventually a human, and then a triune self, and so forth. As a being, thoughts ought to be treated with peace, love, honor, and respect. Gratitude. So important. If you can't even treat the thoughts in your mind with respect, how are you going to treat other people with respect? But also, how are you going to scale that actions up all the way to the realm of permanence, right? Now, here's a warning. Although thoughts are beings, they are not as developed as a triune self, and it is an error to treat them as such. So we do recognize that thoughts are beings, but we also tend to regulate them a lot because they just follow in a linear direction, linear unconscious direction through nature, which itself is also generally unconscious. So we regulate, we guide, we don't treat them the same as a triune self. Thoughts don't really have rights, not that we use the term rights, or maybe they do and it's limited. But this here establishes that they're not on the same footing, not even close. And so we want to balance the need to regulate with also the mindset of respect. Joint ownership of a thought with a triune self. Every thought issued into nature by a triune self is jointly owned by that triune self. So thoughts own themselves because they are beings and beings own themselves. But also, if you think with a thought and you attach to that thought, a piece of you goes into that thought. And so that thought, it's a creature of nature, it's going to carry you along with it. And so you own the thought that you created as well. It's a joint ownership thing. You own what it's going to do to you, the knowledge you're going to get from it, the experiences it will create, the destiny of the thought. The thought itself owns itself because it's just a thought with its own process through nature. By virtue of one for one, the law of thought in 134 exteriorization, every triune self owns its respective thoughts when it issues them. This creates destiny for that triune self. And a warning, not every thought a triune self has is theirs. Not every thought needs to be issued. Know the difference. Because you can pick up thoughts in your mind that you're not attached to, that you weren't even thinking about, and that aren't yours. Yet you can see them in your mind. You can witness them. You can experience them. So not every thought you have is yours. So watch out for that. And you don't own the thoughts that aren't yours, but you can be aware of them. Joint ownership may be shared with other triune selves. The same thought may be jointly owned by each triune self that issued it into nature. And this is the same thing as a mass attachment. A bunch of people all attaching to the same thought makes the thought bigger. And the thought owns itself, and then the people, all the people who are attached to it, they also own that thought to their own little degree, but it's a joint ownership. They're all in that thing together. We can even think of that, all of that as one big giant nation. Now, 144, the law of free will. And this is a different understanding of what you might think of as free will. It's not so much you get to do whatever you want, it's specifically the operation of the desire mind in a specific way, according to Percival. So, free will, law of free will. Every desire is free to choose whether or not it will change itself. It is free to choose to be attached or unattached. So you can choose to attach to a thought, and if you do so, the thought will control you, that is necessary for your growth, or you can choose not to attach to the thought, and you can think without attachment. And that's one of the big lessons from thinking destiny to think without attachment, because that frees you from destiny and especially unwanted destinies. And that is how we get true freedom. And it's also necessary to learn that so that you can free yourself from nature. Thinking without attachment is the true source of freedom. By avoiding attachment, desires avoid nature's machinations and unwanted destiny. Triune selves are thus able to own more of their life and time. They are free. Freedom, defined by Percival, is the ability to be, will, do, and have without attachment to nature. And that's the trick. How do you do all that without being attached to nature? It's something lots of people are going to learn throughout their life, which is the whole point. As a society, it's useful for us to know it as well. But we also have to be respectful. It's not an excuse to remove people's freedoms just because we can't understand what they're doing. Freedom from others. Freedom does not mean being able to do whatever one wants in ignorance. It depends upon building a useful knowledge set to be able to conduct oneself in the world peacefully, respectfully, and honorably. Attachments to nature can run afoul of that knowledge set and thus incur the wrath of other trying selves for the trespass. Self control is extremely important for cultivating the learned skill of freedom. Freedom is a skill, it's an ability. It's something you develop and cultivate in yourself after growing. Here's why. If you're attached to a thought, that thought contains an aim and it's going to go into nature with a desire to experience whatever the aim was. But it balances, and that balancing is going to have knowledge for you. That knowledge is what to do and what not to do for that thought. You're going to learn what's right and what's wrong as it relates to that particular thought. And if you're really good at extracting that knowledge for that thought in isolation, as well as every context that the thought applies in. And so you start to develop a pattern. And then you get the one pattern going, and you start applying that pattern to other patterns to understand how it applies there. And the knowledge begins to snowball. Knowledge set, but also knowledge mountain. It just grows. So peacefully, respectfully, and honorably are important because that's a knowledge set based on thoughts from which what to do and what not to do was already learned. And so when you're conducting yourself in the world with the learned skill of freedom, you're doing it in a way where you're not offending other trying selves. You're not trespassing upon them. You're respectful, peaceful, honorable. You know what not to do, and you are not doing it. And the key is that no one is forcing you not to do it. You have the skill, you have the knowledge. It's your own free will choice to do what you want to do and not do what you don't want to do. No one forces you. It's based on knowledge and growth. And that's where we get our understanding of freedom. And that is why we have an idea in training about freedom and democracy being rooted in self governance. And it's also why some of the laws or some of the concepts in how Triunia work the way they do, because it's predicated on that knowledge set built up for freedom. What to do and what not to do, and a sufficient amount of that knowledge already learned. We can even test for that knowledge in some places in government. So building that up is how you're able to be free. If you don't have sufficient amount of that knowledge, then we say you're like a child, or maybe we say you're insane because you'll be doing wrong actions, but you won't know that you're doing wrong actions. You might think you're right, but you're operating on limited information or incorrect information, and that's a problem. And so freedom is a skill It's an ability. It's learning how to navigate the world, what to do, what not to do, and not attaching to things that could be a problem. And because again, attachments to a thought, they run through nature in a linear, unconscious direction, and sometimes repeatedly. Thus, if you attach to a thought, it's because you don't know what you're doing, ultimately or fundamentally. And so, at the moment of exteriorization, you might be trespassing against somebody. People who are truly free won't ever do that. And again, freedom and responsibility are linked. So people who are truly free and responsible will definitely not do that because they know better. Desires cannot be forcefully changed. No desire can change another desire. No desire can be compelled to change itself. This is because desires are attached to the thought and they must run through the law of thought through nature until they exteriorize and until you balance the thought. It is only when you balance the thought that you're able to extract the desire out of nature and then it can be changed, not before. That's the law of thought. It is a law that we're recognizing here. It can't be changed. Respecting the law of free will. Respecting the law of free will means respecting the operation of desires in a triune self. Interference with this operation is where trespasses against this law occur. And I think this is part of the note and is a rendering error. Desires may choose to attach to nature. There is no freedom in doing so, and it may be necessary to regulate certain pathways. The desire must go through a pathway that leads it to ultimately change itself. It cannot be reprogrammed away. Suppression, shame, banning, and outlawing are unhealthy, damaging, and unproductive ways of controlling desires. This is not permission to go about and just have a field day exploring every single desire that you want, especially if it comes at injury or expense of another. Just saying there are better ways of managing desires that can be tried, and sometimes regulation is required because it's unconscious direction again. Okay, last one in this section, the law of forgetting. When a doer of a triune self incarnates into nature and loses contact with the light of its intelligence, it will forget its past, forget its triune self, and forget its light, which is unfortunate. Forgetting is a thing, or maybe it's a feature. Either way, the matter in this reality is so thick that it's tiring, and forgetting is a thing. So we don't really want to make the matter even more thicker because we'll just get more and more confused. Forgetting the past. Forgetting objects, actions, and events, as well as memories in the course of everyday life, is covered under forget its past. And that's just simple, I forgot a thing. Done. Forgetting the triune self. Forgetting the triune self means being in ignorance of 132, a triune self. They forgot who and what they are. They don't know what they are. They don't know themselves because they forgot. Therefore, ignorance of 142, ownership of self, necessarily follows. And this is important. Knowing oneself is a prerequisite to owning oneself. No one can claim to own their own property if they do not know themselves first. If you don't know that you have a rightness mind, then you can't claim to own it. And if you don't know you have it, and I'm able to alter your thought process in order to tell you what's right and wrong, and do your thinking for you that way, and you're none the wiser, that's a problem for you. Ignorance of self is a prerequisite for coercion and manipulation. No one can coerce or manipulate those who know themselves. And that is why we have all this section on ownership of self. We showed you the triune self in the map earlier, and now we're recognizing ownership over everything in that map because you have to know that in order to protect yourself. Because that sets us up for if there is a coercion or manipulation that alters the system there, in some capacity, we can then recognize that as a crime and punish those responsible. And so we're setting up the framework to be able to do that, to stop the coercion, to stop the rampant coercion, the rampant manipulation, the rampant propaganda and cognitive warfare on this planet. It ends with Triunia, and we have the tools to be able to do it. No one else does. They can't even conceive that this is a problem. Forgetting the light. Forgetting the light of one's own intelligence results in occasionally causing harm to others, among other things. The light of the intelligence is partly how you're able to think and also be conscious, and it's necessary for your evolution. And so, if you don't have it, you'll be confused, and that's adequately recognized in this quote here. They don't know what they're doing, and they still don't know what they're doing because they don't even know themselves. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you found it interesting and inspiring. There is a solution to tyranny. This is it. Your best thinking brought you here. The system's purpose is what it does. It's time for better thinking and a better system. In this video, we looked at 5 foundational and immutable universal laws that we will build our society upon. The law of thought, ownership of self, ownership of thought, the law of free will, and the law of forgetting. We are now fully set up to recognize various consequences of these laws in our universe. The next several videos in the series will be on the recognitions in the Genesis Codex. It should be posted in a week or 2, but subscribe to be notified because there is no regular posting schedule. That's it for now. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.